Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I'm so glad y'all here. A little later than usual today. I don't know what that's going to do for the number of people who can watch this live. It might go up, might go down. But I took a minute to get on because I had to think about like what it is what I'm feeling all week. Even though I got to spend some amazing time with the folks at Scale Up. And I got to be with the folks at Small Changes, Big Shifts, some really good things pouring into me. I've been off kilter a bit. And I thought it was because I'm not really working out like I like, because I've still got a hip issue from that wreck. But I don't think that's it. I think it's because I'm disgusted. I have never really been good about being able to name the negative emotions. I actually like to be liked. And I know some people don't believe that because of how they get to experience me. But yesterday, I asked a question. Someone was presenting some data, and the sample size was small. And oh my God. Um, and I had a question. My question might have been, I might have been, I want to say I might have been wrong, but I don't know how you could be wrong about a question. It was truly just a question. I have a soapbox issue, and it is when people ask a question when they're really trying to make a statement. So I tend not to do that. I don't ask questions I know the answer to. I ask questions because I don't know the answer. And the person I asked the question of lost his temper. He presented some information. I asked the question, and he freaking lost it. And I found myself sitting back in my chair because I don't know how many of you are like this, but you remember like old you and you want to deal with people in the old you way because the Nickinator would have stood up and let him have it. Like, who you talking to, sir? Who are you talking to? But Nicole today just sat back in my chair and was like, sir, you right. But after the meeting, I asked for feedback. He was trying to talk to me. I'm coming to you. No, because now I'm mad. And it is not good to talk to me when I'm sleepy, mad, or hungry. And in fact, I learned an acronym when I was an engineer. It was called HALT. Don't have a conversation when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And but at this point, I'm mad. But I did ask for feedback from some of my friends or people I knew in the space. And one person said, well, you did kind of come with the tone. And what I think is interesting is I reject that. I know when I come with tone, because usually when I come with tone, I'm doing it on purpose. Another person said that when you tend to be the one who provokes, folks think that you're always provoking. That's fair enough. But by and large, folks were like, I had the same question. There are probably a dozen, if not 15 people who came up to me and said, I'm so glad you asked that question because I had the same question. I wasn't even asking the question because I thought other folks had the question. I was asking the question because I was concerned about sample size. We were talking about zip codes, and the person mentioned a sample size of 11. So one of my friends in the space said to me later that on the slide, the presenter wasn't actually presenting the information that was on the slide. And on the slide, they were talking about a neighborhood and not about the zip code. Okay, that makes sense, right? Like that makes sense. And it makes me wonder. I was talking to Miss Nadine this week, and she said, Doc, you need to do a class on like public speaking. There's a whole lot of things I'm terrible at, but I do think I'm pretty decent at the public speaking thing. But I was like, Toastmasters is doing that. There are many other organizations that teach people how to speak publicly. And she pushed me. She said, no, it's more about how when you speak from the stage, you don't make people feel judged. And I was like, that's, I think that's simple, actually. I'll tell you how to do it. It's instead of telling other people what you think they need to do, or instead of telling other people what you think they don't know, When you're on the stage, talk about what you have done in the negative. Talk about how you have needed to change, right? When you're talking about other people, celebrate them, because otherwise you are going to sound judgy. And I know I'm probably oversimplifying it, but the truth of the matter is that's all I do. I think that's why sometimes people experience me differently from the stage than they do when we're talking one-on-one. Because when we're in a small group and you're presenting information you want me to digest, I'm sorry, you should expect a question. Now, you see what just happened in my face? I meant that tone. Yesterday, I was 100% curious. And just like Don said, some people are afraid to ask a question in the moment for many different reasons. Part of what I guess I should understand is that you might be presenting information. The man did all this credentialing. I'm this, I've done this for this company and that company. So my unconscious bias is going, you got the confidence to take a question. Now, if it's a group of young people, interns, presenting information and data, I might not ask a question that is intellectually challenging or emotionally charged. But in this case, this was a very simple question. And if you don't want me focused on zip code, why you bring it up? I think there's something to be said for doing surveys and asking people what they think when there's an entire group of people who didn't answer the survey. Because I know one thing we like to do, we like to say, well, if you didn't take the survey, then your input can't be included. You're right. But it's not the most effective. You see, the plans sometimes that we put together for our entire city is based off of the input of 300-400 people. We got 500,000 people in the city. So to assume that the people who answer the survey are representative of the people who don't is kind of misguided. Why am I bringing that up when I talk about how disgusted I am? Because I'm seeing these polls that talk about approval ratings for our fearless leader. And I know I don't get asked. I know that the largest voting block of all the different affiliations is the people who don't vote at all. And what do those people think? Because we can put the Epstein files aside. It was disgusting before we got there. It was disgusting back when we were making fun of disabled people. It was disgusting when we were discriminating against folk, not renting to them because they happened to be Black. It was disgusting when we pulled out a full page ad on the New York Times against some teenagers who were innocent. It was disgusting at Grab 'em by the Pussy. It was disgusting. And when you vote for disgusting, I think you should expect what we're seeing. I think you should expect what we're seeing. I was coming to a stop at a red light also yesterday, and the light had been yellow, so it was going to turn red. If I kept going, I was going to run a red light. The light wasn't going to turn red while I was in the intersection. I was going to run a red light if I went through it. The man behind me, I don't know what his story is. I don't know what's going on with him. Maybe his dog just died. Maybe he just lost his job. I don't know, but he's behind me. I'm not running a red light. But what I know for sure is that attitude reflects leadership. You know, as folks are being dishonest about what is going on with our president, physically, they're being dishonest about what's going on with him in his past engagements. They're being dishonest about his spiritual connectedness. They're being dishonest about everything related to him. Even when he's got some kind of bruising on his hand, telling me that that's because of a handshake. What are you talking about? When you shake somebody, I've had men try to crush my palm when they shake my hand, and I have never bruised. What are we talking about? This is not about being transparent. This is about basic honesty. This is about stop lying. And when you see words like transparency get so much use over time, like since 1980, the actual use of the word transparency has like catapulted since the 2000s. But at the same time, discretion gone the other way, inverse relationship. When your leader does not have discretion, maybe they will go to islands and do all kinds of things with teenage children. Maybe they will use things like immigration to stoke the flames of hate. Barack Obama deported so many people, they called him the deporter in chief. But he did it within the framing of the law. We need a path to citizenship. If you go back and you look at old presidential debates, what you will see is people who had vastly different ideas about what that should look like. But at its core, we agreed that people need a path to citizenship. How? Different. But if we're aligned, I cannot get it out of my head that Howard Dean became not acceptable as a presidential candidate because he screamed too loud. And now here we are with a person who is saluting, who's never served in the military. In fact, dodged the draft by saying he had a bone spur, saluting instead of putting his hand over his heart. And so a couple years ago, what I noticed about myself was that when I started to feel a little disoriented, there were like three things that were driving it. One, had I been outside and gotten some sun, touched some grass? If I had done that, am I eating real food? Real food, not too much, not too little, like plants and vegetables. And am I getting some raw food in, drinking some water? Because dehydration will have you acting a little weird out here. But third, and I had never given any consideration to this, am I being honest about how I feel? And I've noticed that because I don't want to be the one to continually bring this up, because people don't want to talk about the President of the United States. They don't think it matters. We just need to talk about what God is doing, you know? The content's too divisive. But what have we become when we don't think leadership matters? Just a few short years after we determined that wearing a flag pin or not was a disqualifier. That wearing a tan suit is a disqualifier. And now the press secretary doesn't just skirt issues. I used to admire Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and people used to give me a hard time about it because I was like, I've never seen anyone spin and ditch and dodge a question like her in my life. And I wish well-meaning people could be more like it. But this current press secretary, she ain't ditching and dodging. She's outright lying. Transparency. Can we start with honesty? Can we start with just tell the truth? Yeah, think about my mama today. She used to always say, tell the truth and shame the devil. I'm wondering if the person who was presenting, who lost his temper because he got a question, the guy behind me throwing his arms all up and screaming and yelling because I wouldn't run a red light. If the way people are just acting in general with our homicide numbers being up, and by the way, They're figuring it out in Birmingham. They're figuring it out in Baltimore. They figured it out in Boston, Omaha. Crime is at its lowest rate ever in Chicago. The rest of us can figure it out too. If we stop mimicking the behavior of our commander in chief, which is lawlessness and folks just run amok doing whatever it is they want to do. This week someone said to me, I can't figure you out. I don't know if you're pro-police or anti-police. I found the statement to be a little curious because I've never thought of myself as pro-police or anti-police. I've read the work of Dr. Angela Davis around abolishing the police. I've had my own personal experiences with policing. Yesterday, I was at a coffee shop I like, the Equal Minded Cafe on Truce. There were 10 ATF agents standing outside with guns and masks on and weapons drawn and battering rams. A little thin Black woman walks to the door. She looked like she couldn't have been more than 25. She says, I don't know what she says to them. I'm sitting in my car and I'm watching. My entire limbic system just disrupted. I don't know what she said, but they left, all 10 of them. I go into the cafe and I get my little chai tea. I was 14, studying for a history test. The first time I had any real interactions with the police. They broke down the door of our house. There were drug houses all around us. My mama, Sister Gertrude Price, wasn't slanging nothing but chicken dinners. She had left for the day to go get something, I don't know. And before she came back, we always had our door open, by the way, never locked. The police used a battering ram, knocked that door down in like 2 hits, maybe 3. Came storming into our small house. 10 or 12 of them. Pointing guns at my head, throwing me on the floor, ruining my ability to study for my history test. That's my experience with policing. That has not made me anti-police. I appreciate when the police show up when I have an accident. I appreciate that in a city this size, we got detectives looking out for the kind of folks you see on Criminal Minds. That doesn't make me for police or anti-police. What I am instead is pro-protection and service. I see the relationship that other people have with police versus what I get to experience. Versus when I get pulled over just down the street from my house. Perhaps I was going 3 miles over the speed limit in a school zone. But to ask me, whose car is this? It's just not the kind of thing that I know some of my colleagues experience. So I can't figure you out. Are you anti-police or pro-police? Well, what I am is pro-protection and service. What I am is, when you know your leader is corrupt, don't follow that. What I'm against is lawlessness within the law. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that there are people who do. And they are doing so without violating people's constitutional rights. And it's hard to make that case when at the highest level of government, we are violating people's constitutional rights. And it is disgust, I feel. It's amazing that I was able to regulate yesterday when that dude was yelling at me, because I had not gone through the ruler framework that Mark Brackett has put out that says, recognize your emotions, understand your emotions, label them, express them in a healthy way so that then you can regulate. But somehow I managed, even without going through those steps, to eke out a, so you're right. You're right. But I think Miss Nadine may be onto something, even though I just kind of try to stay in my lane of leadership development. If you think that you might be interested in me teaching a class about how to come across as a more authentic leader from the stage so that you can move more people, let me know. Send me a quick little note in DM. Don't have to be long. And just say whatever you want to say. And not something I think I'd charge for, at least not at this point. I think I'd be testing it out. Not to teach people how to speak, but how to go from good to great and be more authentic and not performative on the stage. But I'm curious about us, y'all, because suppressed feelings always come out, and they never come out in pretty ways or at convenient times. It's probably what happened to the man at the stoplight. That's what probably happened with the man yesterday who lost his temper, and I was just asking about sample signs. It is probably what's happening to you when you find yourself not able to get out of the bed by the end of the week and needing to just recoup. I'm about to Google, what do you do when you have feelings of disgust that are about things that you really can't control? Because I do believe that before this all happened, I did everything I could to get the word out. Most of the time, people just said back to me, oh, he can't do that because it's illegal, or they wouldn't be able to do that because it's illegal. Meanwhile, domestic violence shelters are not being funded, food banks are not being funded, and real services that people need and were told because Congress had voted, things are not getting funded. And interestingly, there's enough of us who it's not impacting at all. How do I know that these nonprofits are not being funded? Not because I need their services, because they are my clients. So yeah, it's impacting me, but not in the same way as somebody who needs food or needs a bed because their spouse is beating them. I wish that today I could tell you that I'm feeling an incredible sense of jubilation and happiness. I do have optimism because I believe in the strength of the human spirit to overcome this foolishness. I do have gratitude for where I'm sitting right now. And I try to have a general level of joy. But while I was denying the fact that I also am just disgusted, it was preventing me from figuring out, like, honestly, from how to be focused and think about what the next right action is we can take. I don't love the movie Remember the Titans, but I certainly love the line. Attitude reflects leadership, Captain. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We've got work to do.